Yo, Reg, stop doing your Christmas shopping. We've got something far more valuable for you today. So close down all your other browsers, not this one, because then you have to log back in. And but none of your Amazon. What do you shop on? eBay, Toys R Us. I don't really know. Whatever it is, stop it. Pay attention to this. We have something far more valuable. We have the gift today of how to future-proof your data center. You must think that's valuable, or else you wouldn't be here in the first place. So, please sit down for the next hour. Avoid all distractions. We've got some really good slides for you today and some really good practical advice. So, first of all, let me tell you about, for those of you who haven't been here before, about the stuff that's above my head, the little buttons that you need to know about. The most important one is the one that says ask questions, because you've got to ask questions to us, because then we'll answer your questions, and it's sort of good. And you always come up with better questions than I do. This should not surprise anyone, but you do. So if you ask the questions here, then it gives me questions to ask the guys who are in the studio today. Do that. You can get copies of the slides afterwards. There's some good stuff on the slides as well, so I would recommend you getting those in your PDF format. Give us your reaction as well. Don't do it until the end, because then you'll know what you're reacting to. So, if that's all clear, let's have a look who's on the Regcast today. I've put myself at the top of that. I should really put myself at the bottom. But the most important person who's in the studio today is the person who's not usually here. And he's from HP. It's David Chalmers. Hello, David Chalmers. Hello, David.
Good morning.
It's really nice to have you here.
You.
David, so what do you do at HP?
So I'm the what they call the chief technologist. So I get to talk to customers about what we do and what they're trying to do, and I lead the pre-sales organisation to help the sales force get the right information out there.
If it mucks up further down the line, you're not responsible.
No, I own total customer ownership all the way through, so no, we care.
Bummer. So I told everyone to stop doing the Christmas shop. What do you want for Christmas, David?
Want for Christmas? Well, what I want for Christmas is a Range Rover. But what I expect to get is some new socks. So somewhere in between probably would be good.
I'd rather have the new socks. I think, do you remember when, this was a couple of years ago when we did this, and there was a guy from another company who was in here, and I said, what do you want for Christmas? And he said that he wanted his product to succeed. It's from Microsoft.
That's dedication.
Yeah, that is terrific, isn't it? And also in the studio today with us is Dale. Hello, Dale.
Hello,
nice to have you back.
Yeah, good.
What's on your Christmas list?
Well, with a couple of teenagers in the house, one of the things I thought might be quite nice would be a cash point in the hall. But then I thought one of these newfangled money trees would be quite good. And just stick one in the back garden and send the kids out there when they come cap in hand.
So you know what to get these guys. If you're really impressed with the Regcast, just send it to me. Socks, Range Rovers, money trees, anything like that. I'm sure I'll pass it on. So, now, why are we here today? Because here's this thing. First of all, we had a lot of talk about hybrid clouds at the moment. Unless you've been under a rock for the past 2 years, you can't have missed it. And so we're looking practically at the way that changes what you're going to do every day and what you're going to be doing now and next year and even next week. And because you've got a data center already, you have to make that work in the future. And this one in the quotes here, there we go. What does this one, Dale? This comes from you. This comes from Reg Readers, actually, doesn't it?
Oh, what? Yeah. This stuff.
Yeah. So this is, you're dead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the impact of some of these new ideas and all this cloudy stuff on the data center, and a lot of people just trying to figure out what actually is the impact on the data center of some of this stuff. So I suppose that's kind of what we're going to be talking about mostly today. But yeah, we get we probably get more questions than answers around this when we poll Reg Readers on research.
Let's provide some answers. Well, actually, here are some of the things that the Reg Readers have been telling you recently, isn't it, Dale? And I pulled out first the optimists because I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And so what are the optimists saying that's going to happen by the year 2020?
Yeah, we always get a range of optimists right through the spectrum to pessimists. The optimists are looking forward to the data center becoming a lot more cloudy. All this flexible, dynamic promise of cloud that we hear a lot of, a lot more control over your resources and so on. And the other big thing that comes through is actually integrating that with all this public cloud stuff. So actually trying to sort of look across the piece and have everything humming nicely together. So that's That's what the optimists are looking forward to, a cloudy future with everything working nicely in harmony.
I've got a feeling that I might know what you're going to say to this, David, but when you meet your pre-sales, do you get a lot of optimists? Is it optimists or pessimists?
I think it's a fair mixture, to be honest. Most of the people in the industry recognise that they have to be optimistic because this one's not going away. This is not a fashion or a fad, and if we're honest, IT has seen many of those over the years, but this one, in whichever shape the organisations are going to take it, and there will be many, this one's here to stay. So I see a lot more optimism than pessimism.
So we could have called the Regcast "Get with the Programme," or else you're out.
Well, not necessarily, because it's actually all about shades of grey. It's not about black and white, and I think that's one of the key learnings here is it's going to happen to you. It's a matter of choosing how it happens in your organisation to make it successful.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's have a look and see what Reg readers are telling us about their attitudes to cloud, Dale.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, most people I think appreciate that this thing isn't going away at once. You get a few diehards who are clearly that's the 8% there, I think, who said we're going to resist things as much as we possibly can. But most people see a place for sort of cloud services and cloudy type stuff in the future. One thing though that this chart shows, the blue parts of this pie chart, these are the guys that say yes, all this hosted service stuff is going to be really part of the equation going forward, but the centre of gravity for our IT is still going to be the data centre. So that's quite an important thing, actually. So it's not as if people envisage some big shift out away from the data centre into the cloud. The data centre still remains a very, very important part of the equation.
This is realistic? This is what you see?
Yeah, I think it is, but it varies quite a lot by size of company. I think the big companies absolutely agree with that. The people who've got the data centres, the people who've already got significant numbers of skilled staff on board. Where I do see it slightly different is at the very bottom end, the SMBs, the people who don't necessarily have lots of in-house skills are going more on the wholesale market. If you're starting a little company today, why would you buy technology as opposed to buying the service from the cloud? So I think it depends a little bit on the size of the company. But certainly the private cloud is where all the medium and larger companies have started, because it's where they can do that. That and the test and dev environment that we'll touch on later.
That's the split that we see, is it?
It depends how you look at it, actually. It's not exactly what we see in terms of in activity to date. In fact, most of the activity tends to be focused on large organisations. If you flip the chart, Tim, you'll see this. It's not at all to disagree with what you were saying in
disagree
principle.
with it. Yes, disagree with it. Right. Actually, we should have a bit more disagreement on this.
All right, you're wrong.
David.
You're wrong.
Good stuff. That's what I like.
No, seriously. And what this chart is showing, this is from a piece of research we did a little while ago, just looking at how important alternative delivery models are seen to be over the coming 3 years. So the kind of things we looked at there, if you look at these bars from top to bottom, private cloud, traditional hosting, that's your kind of more fixed as opposed to all the dynamic Amazon-style stuff. And then the green ones there are the dynamic cloud services, which is notable actually by the fact that it seemed to be a lot less important than private cloud, which I think is quite significant to look at. And we do see a difference in terms of organisation size. And I absolutely agree. You would be mad if you were starting a small business now to actually start installing Exchange servers and anything of that nature. But actually, a lot of small businesses they aren't really aware that there are options. And I think there's a big awareness thing still stopping people actually going in that direction at the lower end. But at the high end, everyone targets them. All the sales forces, your guys, everyone else out there is targeting them, educating them. Obviously, a lot of these guys are specialists. A lot of you guys out there are reading things every day, and so they do start to experiment and get things moving a lot more quickly. So I think separating needs from action is quite important. A lot of potential at the lower end, but a lot of the initial action is still at the high end.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difference between we started off with 2020. What are things going to look like in 2020? And so you got the optimists.
Yeah.
Granted, they are the optimists. We're talking about this wonderful sort of world of sort of flexibility and how easy it is to sort of migrate across between across any boundaries that we set up at the moment. Yeah. Looking at the next 3 years, what we see as dominant is that people are looking at fixed infrastructures and private clouds.
Yeah.
I think the thing that will change that picture, though, is the attitude to the channel. Because that's a model, I think, that reflects very much, as you say, the people who are doing it direct, the bigger companies with the ability to do it. I think at the lower end, we've seen some of the channel partners were a little slower to get engaged, but now very much more switching on to how do I deliver channel or cloud-based services in there as well as just product. And that, I think, is going to have a big multiplier effect on the lower end, because they typically are buying more from the channel than they are direct.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because a lot of big cloud vendors have kind of assumed that they could reach around the channel and start dealing directly with small business. It just doesn't work that way. And so the channel was actually neglected for a few years, I think, and you're absolutely right, channel guys are now getting on board a lot more. So that should change that picture and balance things.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we put a lot of effort into was actually working with the channel.
Yeah.
And we came up with other people do it, but we were, I think, one of the first that said we'll actually pay our people to sell a channel-based cloud service and radically change the model there.
Did you have that idea that Giles just sort of mentioned that I almost skipped over, that you could disintermediate them, you could sort of forget them when it came to the cloud service?
No, of course, we thought about it, nightmare. Absolutely the wrong answer. In our view, it's completely the wrong thing to do. We were all about how do we take the channel with us. So we did a thing called the Cloud Agile program, for example, where we pay our salespeople commission if they sell a partner's cloud service. So that's a very different model. It has to be together.
But when you're talking to the customers, was this something that when you were talking to potential customers, they were telling you that they liked working with their channel guy, or is it just that you couldn't supply what they wanted?
The fundamental thing that a channel partner really delivers is customer intimacy. They know the customer, particularly at that SMB scale, far better than any major vendor is going to. So you have to do it together. It's not a case of going around them or cutting them out of the loop. They've got to get together. The thing that had to change, though, was the channel partner to recognise they had to sell service, not just product. And that took some of them a little longer than others. Some were very quick into that market. Some of them took a little while to realise that actually we've got to change a little bit of our business model here, and that's where we've been helping them a lot.
Did you have to say to them, do you have to push them into this and say, to some of them, you've got to shape up, guys? Or
well, one or two. I mean, I think you got the normal distribution. There were some that were dragging us because they were ahead of the curve. There was the bulk in the middle that were working, and there were one or two at the bottom end where we had to say, come on, get with the program, because it's going to leave you behind if you don't. But on the whole, the channel, I think, is going to be the bit that addresses that part of the market.
Yeah, but the one thing I would say, which I think is really, really important, is I do hear a lot of people saying, all you guys out in the channel, you've got to become cloud providers, as if you should trash your existing business, which, we fundamentally disagree with. That's not what customers want. They want choice. So they want you to offer product as well as service, and that's really important.
I mean, I think we'll come back to this a number of times, but our view, and certainly my view of the world, is it's going to be hybrid. It's going to be more messy than it was. That's not a comfortable thought.
More messy,
but that's actually the reality that we'll see over the next few years, and getting used to that, I think, is one of the crucial things that make people, the difference between being successful and not so successful.
One of the things that vendors often have done, especially in this studio, is try to make out that things like this are not messy. You're saying it's actually going to be more messy.
Potentially. I think there are ways that we can help, but I think recognising that it's not about black and white. It's going to be hybrid, it's going to be shades of grey. As you said earlier, people are not going to trash their entire traditional IT infrastructure and replace it with an off-premise cloud service. That's not going to happen. But they will have combinations of services, and it's how you make the combination coherent and whole that really matters. And at the lower end, that's what the channel partner does. It helps them make it coherent and whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's have a look at some of these 50 shades of grey that we have.
Well, this is a chart I use quite a bit, actually, when I'm talking to groups of architects and CIOs and that kind of audience, because there is this big question mark. How far should you push this cloud stuff? And people are naturally quite wary of a lot of the messaging that you hear from some of the extreme advocates out there. So what I generally do is put this chart up, and it's a good way of focusing your mind, actually. So if you go from, on this quadrant diagram, if you go from left to right, you're going from on-premise infrastructure to hosted infrastructure. If you go from bottom to top, you're going from your traditional fixed infrastructure where you have servers and database and stuff dedicated to apps, to more of a dynamic private cloud type or cloud type infrastructure. And most IT is in the bottom left traditionally at the moment, with a little bit in the bottom right, so that's your traditional sort of hosting environment. But what we see is a general migration from the bottom to the top and then from the left to the right. The big question is, though, how far will it go? And you can what we talk about is the point of equilibrium. So if you were to sort of be able to wave a magic wand and get the right workloads and applications in the right quadrant, what would it look like? And whenever we play that kind of game with people, we invariably end up with something in each one of the 4 quadrants, and some things actually that span the quadrants or burst across from time to time and that kind of stuff. The point being, you've got to take an inclusive view of all this stuff. Sure. If you assume everything's going to move to the top right, that's just pie in the sky. That's never going to happen for most, maybe some small organisations, as you said, but it's going to be very rare.
So the trick to this, when we're talking about future-proofing now, the trick to coping with this is to be able, first of all, to know what goes where.
Yep.
And secondly, to know at the right time to move from one to the other.
And thirdly, what's the worst nightmare? You end up managing each one of those 4 quadrants totally differently with different tools, different techniques, different processes, different teams, and so on. And so the whole thing just ends up really fragmented and disjointed, particularly when you could look in any one of those 4 boxes and you've actually got multiple options within those boxes as well. Top right, Amazon versus Google versus other hosters and so on. So it's about sort of looking across the piece and saying, well, how can we actually organise ourselves?
I think one of the key things for us when we sit down with customers, and we've developed quite a lot of tools to help them, but there's a debate here with actually working out what's core to your business and what's context to your business. What is it that you do that makes you you, where your differential is, your difference in the market, and what stuff you just have to do. Maybe do well, might even be regulated, but there's no differential in it, because that is often the bit that people should be looking at for the first services they put on the outside. Is email going to differentiate your business? No, but it's vital that you get it done and done it right. Do it right, pardon me.
It'll differentiate you if you don't do it right.
Correct. So that has to be done properly, but people will typically look at that. So one of the first things we tend to do with customers is sit down and go, so what is core and what is context, and actually have you worked out where all the services fit? And so that's a very interesting place for a lot of people to start on this journey, is working out it's core, it's too important, it's different, I built it, it's always going to be on the inside, it's on my traditional IT, it's way over there, it's a test and dev I want to buy for a week, it might be an email system, it might be a CRM machine, those things getting closer to the core but still context, well, I'll look there first for my cloud-based services. But sitting down and actually doing the exercises, what is core and what's context, is a great place to start.
Yeah, related to that, we still come across a lot of people who assume that if you are going to move things outside, then you're going to have to live with some compromises, security issues, service
issues. You said that in the studio, to be honest.
Well, exactly. But the point is that you can't generalise there, because there are a lot of situations, in fact, in a majority of situations for smaller businesses, your service levels are probably going to go up and your security is going to go up when you move things out, because cloud providers can, secure things a lot easier than the average medium-sized company.
We're dealing with the idea of compromise wrongly, I suppose, because you might lose some features or some individual things that you've stuck on the top of it. For example, if you push
it's impossible to generalise. There's just such a huge range of cloud services out there, some good, some bad, but also quite different in terms of exactly what they offer and what they do, right from infrastructure right up through the stack to complex services, utility services. So the trick is not to generalise. Agree with you. You've got to understand what you're running, how important it is, what the constraints are around it, and then you can start making some decisions as to where these things should best be located.
This is how the slide we got up now is about how you've conceptualised this decision-making process.
Indeed. So pardon me with the cliche, but most organisations are on the journey from the left to the right. So they've started in the traditional IT. It's very homogenised. It's typically very siloed. It's typically very difficult to share any infrastructure, therefore it's more expensive. They're trying to get to the picture on the right where everything is shared, everything's coherent, everything's joined up. But actually where most organisations are right now is in the middle. And some of them are doing it very well. I shared Dale's point there, you can't really generalise. Some have adopted cloud very effectively. However, many organisations are struggling because actually they're falling into some of the traps and creating effectively cloud-based silos as opposed to static-based silos. Right? And in many ways, those are worse to actually manage and get yourself out of.
And in the next few minutes, what we are going to be doing is looking exactly at what those traps are based on your experience, isn't it? Exactly how those traps are and exactly how you avoid falling into them. But as you're saying, is there a repeated pattern of behaviour coming up? Can we really say there are a lot of companies for whom it is going wrong? they're making the same mistakes.
And now there are, and that's what I'm going to do today, is share some of the lessons that we've learned, I've seen customers learn.
Good. And that's, does this look realistic to you, Dale? You're a realistic man.
Well, it defines the problem, I think, which is what we're doing at the moment. And if you go to the next slide, Red's readers.
Oh, the pessimists.
The pessimists.
Yes.
I mean, this is the...
Started with the optimists. Now my glass is half empty. What are the pessimists saying?
Well, and this reflects a lot of reality, exactly as you were saying. The history of cloud service consumption to date is we'll have a bit of this, we'll have a bit of that, we'll have a bit of the other, and all these things, are just acquired and they work in isolation. And I think people are realising that actually that's not sustainable. You can't continue consuming cloud services on a piecemeal basis with nothing integrated, no policy coordination, and so on.
What are the pessimist individual nightmares then? What have we got here?
Yeah, well, and related to that is the idea of departments actually making their own decisions, so actually going out, and we've already seen a lot of examples of that with CRM and other applications where people have just signed up to cloud services without the IT department. Shadow IT, yeah.
So, Well, actually, I mean, the thing about Shadow IT is it's a message to the business, isn't it, David? It's basically saying, here's the stuff we want, you ain't giving it to me. Correct.
And it's almost like, if those of us were old enough to remember the PC revolution of the mid-80s, when PCs got bought on any sort of budget because IT didn't want them, but they added value. Well, cloud is almost like that, but writ large. If the IT department, the internal service providers, can't come up with the goods and quickly, the ability for the business users to go, well, I've got a credit card, I've got a telephone, I've got a web address, I'm off. They can go bypass them very, very quickly.
You sound like you're on the side of the guys with the credit cards.
You have to be, because they are the business. Right? Yeah, they are the people who actually are generating the work. We did a study this summer, and we spent a lot of time talking to companies about talking to the business people on one side and in the same companies, the IT organisation. And what we found was more than half of all the people we talked to had cloud-based services running in production, and the IT department knew nothing about them on the day they went live. And that's a problem. They typically only find out when the business user phones up saying, it's broken, can you fix it for me? Because they never bought the support contract. They sort of half did it. We see that a lot. And that's, if you like, the shadow IT gone wrong. I think the good side of that is it puts pressure to actually move more quickly.
So people phone up and say, it's broken, and the IT department says, what's it?
Correct.
And so while it may be legitimate for these guys to have gone out, they're doing it wrong. And as one of the things we said about before is we are in danger of getting into a mess. This is just a huge mess.
The problem is they go from one extreme to the other because, IT might give them a time scale and a cost which they, don't particularly like. So they think, well, let's go out, get the credit card out, whatever, and do this stuff unilaterally. But then you end up with quick and dirty projects.
Yeah.
So someone actually just slapping something in, getting it up and running. What's the promise of cloud? Get your credit card out, sign up, and in hours sometime. And you see this written in adverts for cloud services. Yeah. You're up and running in hours. Well, you can be, but if you haven't done some basic sort of thinking through of, well, actually, what am I going to use this thing for? Where is it going? You end up with very short-term decisions. And it's quite interesting. I was speaking to a big consulting firm recently who have a big Salesforce.com practice, and they said a lot of their projects right now are driven by people realising that they've got loads of Salesforce.com all over the place in the organisation, and actually none of it works together, none of it works with other systems, and they're going in and they're consolidating this stuff, doing a little bit of analysis in terms of what the data structure should look like, and getting it all working together properly. And why is that? It's not because IT suddenly decides this should happen. It's because the businesses are hitting a wall in terms of being able to work together across these things. So I think it's short-termism sometimes. And I agree with you, it highlights a need. But actually, you want to work with the business.
Correct.
And here's the thing. Now, at some point in the next half hour, I want you to resolve this question for me. Not now, but at some point. Because on the one hand, you're saying, yeah, it's good, we've got to recognise this. On the other hand, Dale's given us the reality, which is there's stuff all over the place. And you can't future-proof your data centre if you've got this sort of guerrilla IT activity going on in the background. So we need to take account of what the pessimists are telling us here, don't we, and sort this out. I think, however, I need to give you a chance to actually say what is it before I actually say, you've not answered the question.
I just want to raise one more thing, which is what this last guy, the second but last thing is saying, which is about funding, to be honest. And a lot of shadow IT is it kind of happens because people can fund it out of local budgets.
Yeah.
And actually, when you think about, go back to the data center vision that we were talking about earlier on, and shared dynamic infrastructure. Well, the keyword there is shared, so it becomes a corporate resource, and that's not really how a lot of IT budgets work. They work based on capital investments at a departmental level, and that's causing a problem for people. So I'm sure we'll pick that one up as we go through.
Just a very quick, before we move on here, Johnny's just raised this one, as there seems to be a fundamental, from what he can see, there's a fundamental difference in the concept of how the future will open up between vendors. So you've got what he calls the old guard, HP and Microsoft, and so, who are saying hybrid, hybrid, hybrid. Mm-hmm. And whereas there's a much more pure message coming from the Amazon Google end, which is you don't need to bother about the hybrid, a lot of you. Just come with us. Just come to us. Do you see that? Do you see them as the enemy?
I see that approach as incredibly naive, frankly, because the world is just not that simple. Uh-huh. For example, I did some great work last summer with a big oil company who were very advanced in their break. They'd done that core context stuff. And they'd worked out that their IT department had to deliver 85 things to the business to make them work. 6 of them were core and defined them whose they were. 79 were just stuff they had to do. And that 79, yes, you could do that with a purist message, but the core of the business was the 6. Their challenge was, how do I make 85 things coherent and whole if I'm buying from all sorts of different places? Right. And if you take a purist approach to that, they were never, ever going to take some of that core data, the thing that defined them as a company, and move it outside the building, never mind onto a shared service. Was never going to happen. So I think the siren song of purist is fine, you can put everything on the cloud, just come with us, it'll work. It's naive. It's not going to work that way. Good. And recognizing that at the beginning, as opposed to getting into the hole and then digging yourself out, is an awful lot better way to go. And recognizing that actually the world will be hybrid.
Excellent. So, and I said you see them as the enemy. That's just sort of yes, isn't it, really? Now, so let's have a look. You've divided the potential problems into 2 bits, haven't you? There's a business bit first and a technical bit second.
Right. So what we've done, I mean, we get this a lot. People come to us and say, you're HP, you're the biggest IT company in the world. You must have done this before. Can't you share? Can't you tell us the lessons we can learn so we can avoid them? And that's what we're doing here.
Okay.
Really, we've got about 2,000 customers right now across the world that are doing cloud. And that's a very wide spectrum, from very large, sophisticated in production at the high end being very successful to people sticking their toe in the water at the other end. So we've learned a lot. And I've broken it into these 2 camps. There's 3 businessy focused things that I want to talk about, and then 4 technical focused ones. Yes, some of it looks very simple. And if you're coming at this cold, you think, but that's so obvious, everybody must be doing it. But it's not true. So we keep seeing customers making similar mistakes, and therefore it's got to be something that's worth looking at, even if it may look a little bit motherhood and apple pie. And then looking at the technology ones in terms of the things that are probably easier to fix.
Yeah.
So if we can just step through some of these, and these are the three business ones. The first one very much, and this is coming back to the shadow IT piece in a way that the core strength that an internal IT organization has got above everything else is it knows its end user customer better than anybody. So they know what the business needs better than any outside vendor. What we don't see, though, is them actually reacting well to that. I've seen so many internal IT companies that said, right, we're going to do cloud, know what we're doing, and they build this fabulous service catalog with dozens, hundreds, of a few I've seen with thousands of services in it, and nobody cares. Because the business users, the analogy that gets on, it's a bit like what the end user wants is like a fine dining experience. You want to go to a restaurant where you've got a limited amount of choice and you get it delivered to you just as you want it. What they don't want to see is the kitchen with you can build anything you like so long as you've got all the ingredients. That's what many IT departments tend to deliver up. Here's a service catalogue, build anything you want, and they go, no, way too hard. So it's about engaging with the business at a business level so you define the service that they want, not build them a kitchen where they can make anything they want. They want to get to that fine dining style experience. Not everybody's there today, but cooperation with business and IT sounds awfully basic, but actually an awful lot of people fail in the cloud at the very first step because they go off and do it by themselves.
Dale, does the service catalogue-centric view prevail still?
For the people that have tried going down that route and just sort of offering up that huge menu, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because a lot of I think it's easy to forget is that a lot of end users, business people out there who are making these decisions, they don't know what they don't know. And so they don't know how to differentiate between 10 different options that do largely the same thing or something very similar. And so they're seduced when a sales guy calls up from one of these cloud companies and says, hey, we got lots of customers like you, and we find that and they go with that, because that sounds it sounds as if that guy is really tuned into their needs, and I think that's the problem. So actually having IT tune a much finer set of options makes a lot more sense.
I think one of the other findings we had that kind of plays into this one as well, from that survey where we did half the companies didn't know. The other big thing that leapt out was the rate of change expected by the different parts of the company. And crudely put, we see business users trying to go about 5 times faster than most IT departments can keep up.
Right.
So if the business needs it in a month, it's going to take them half a year.
Yeah.
If they want it in a week, it's going to take them a month.
Yeah.
And that's where the drive to go around them comes from. And it's using this sort of technology and using cloud to help them deliver that I think will be one of the big wins.
It is difficult. Sometimes you need that 6 months to get it right, don't you? That no has to be an option. You can't have it in a month.
Or you can't have it now in the way that you want it. And if somebody on the outside is promising it to you, they actually don't know enough about the business to get it right. And while they'll implement it in a day, as you say, hours if need be, actually will it answer your business problem? Probably not.
There's 2 points I'd like to make here. One of them is, don't think of it as boiling the ocean, because if you compare the HR department to the marketing department, for instance, you're going to see a big difference in terms of expectations of how quickly things are going to change. The marketing department are everything changes with every campaign. So it's important to actually segment your workforce or customer base, however you want to look at it, and just understand where the hotspots are, because that's where, if you don't actually gear yourself up to deliver things quickly, that's where they will take the law into their own hands. So there are different levels of exposure depending on where you look in the organisation. The other thing is, the whole point of trying to get an infrastructure in place that's coherent and flexible is so that you can respond more quickly. And the problem is, when you're trying to deal with that rapid response and you're sitting there with a hodgepodge of disjointed traditional IT, I mean, you don't stand a hope in hell of moving that quickly. So that's why it's important to start sooner rather than later, to move towards a foundation which is a lot more change-friendly.
Yeah, and one that's designed with the business, not without the business. And the second point here, I think, is sort of building on that. And this is a real example from an organisation that we got engaged with, who had a project where the IT department had built the coolest cloud-based service you're ever going to see. The technology was fabulous. The latest and greatest in the hardware and the software and the management infrastructure. And every time a vendor came to them and said, this is really cool, will you be a reference site for us? They said, no, can't do that. Well, why not? It's really cool. Yeah, but nobody uses it. Nobody uses it because the business wasn't involved. And they came back to us and said, the learning that we got from this is, when you're looking at a cloud service, if you're not spending at least 50% of your time on the service delivery bit and the much smaller part on the technology bit, it's going to go wrong.
And what do you do with that 50%? Is that sitting around in rooms with people saying, what do you want? Or how does that work?
It sounds like it's going to take a long time, but it doesn't have to take a long time. But it's sitting down with the business and working out, what do you want? So, for example, we can do that core versus context study on a company in 6 hours. So we've a workshop process. It's not that complicated to get started. Yes, sure, there's lots of detail and it will take time afterwards, but actually identifying where the right place is to start, so you start getting real value from a business point of view, not the shiniest, greatest technology that was ever made. That's where you get the win. If you focus only on the technology, if you only focus on building the best thing that's out there, you fall into the we built it and nobody came trap. And we've seen that from too many
And
places.
who should lead that, or if you've got that? Should it be someone from the outside, because they tend to have the experience of this and they can be objective? Or should it be the IT department who really knows?
What we see a lot of the time is using people on the outside, people like us, people like Dale's organisation, is they're the catalyst to actually get the right people in the room. If they try and do it all by themselves, they're carrying too much baggage and too many preconceived ideas. IT department's a bunch of techies that don't understand the business people want unrational things, we can't deliver it today. If you use somebody on the outside to broker that, you can often make much faster progress. That's not universally true, of course. Some organisations are very differently organised, but on the whole, breaking down the initial barriers by using somebody on the outside is often a very quick way to do it.
Do you ever get involved in this, don't you?
Yeah. Well, that's where this, that quadrant I was showing earlier on came from. When we do this kind of work, we find that sort of thing. That's just one of the tools that we use. But I think that the important thing is, however it works, whether you use an external catalyst or whether you do it internally, you kind of need to move to a sustainable position where IT and business people have an ongoing dialogue. This isn't a one-off exercise to re-baseline. You've got to put something in place which is persistent. Yeah,
and this is, I think, the third and last of the businessy type points I want to make, and this is actually the hardest one, in that most organisations today, their organisational structure is now holding them back, not helping them go forward. Because if I look at, you talked earlier about being data centric, inside most data centres I see technology-centric teams. There's the storage team, the network team, the server guys. There's probably a supervision management layer on top. And if you're going to deliver a service, you just can't do it that way. You've actually got to break up those teams and get multifaceted teams that are focused around the application, that are focused around the service. Now, it's not the point that turning everybody into generalists, that's not the case. You're still going to have the technology depth of skills, but you're organised around the app and the service, not around the technology. And that's quite a hard one for people to do. So I've seen a lot of companies that do it one app at a time. So they're going to do something new, they're going to revamp an app that's already there, they'll create a cross-functional team on a project basis to go and do that. But actually that's the model for going forward. And they slowly migrate as the projects come up into that space. It's not a very comfortable thing for a lot of people because they were very happy in their, I'm a server guy and I give things to the storage guy and we wait for networking to catch up type model. Not acceptable. Takes too long. It's not that it doesn't work, it just takes too long.
Organisation is a very hard problem to solve though, isn't it? Because you've got a networks guy, for example, whose time is not going to be fully taken up by one project, who'll be needed very fundamentally at some points. So then that person has to be spread between different projects.
This is why you've seen most of it. The fastest moving people in this space are the bigger companies that have more of the economies of scale.
They can actually dedicate staff to it.
And that's where we've seen it. But the model, I think, is still true.
Because otherwise, you're constantly being pulled between different projects. Someone wants you over here to do it for that, but you need to do that as well, and we need you to do that by Friday, especially because there's not enough staff, full stop.
But if you break it into the services pieces, then it's much easier to prioritise, actually. Because this app is more important than that app, because this one's core to my business and there's money depending on it, and this one's tangential or context to my business, and that one can wait. It actually, you see a lot of help with the prioritisation if you think about this model. But it's the hardest one to break, but it's one of the things that we think is most important to actually making the very best out of the cloud piece.
Tell us your experiences with that, actually, if you have them, because I'm interested in this sort of thing. Dale, what
there's a couple of points on this. Management consultants talk about IT governance and how you make decisions, which is exactly what you've just been talking about. How you prioritise apps. There's a discipline there, which some people out there will be familiar with. Portfolio management of one kind or another, project portfolio management, service portfolio management. There's all kinds of jargon that's used in that space. But the whole idea is, actually understand what kind of services you're trying to deliver, and then actually prioritise your activity. So you're dealing with the most urgent stuff and or the most valuable stuff before other things. It might just be a function of how loud people shout, which is how long.
So just a quick thing before we get away from service catalogues, because we're going to move on, but we do have a question here from Phil. Well, it's more of a question. He says that really what you need is two levels of service catalogue. You need a business-facing service catalogue, the business services, and you need your a standard ingredients catalogue, he calls it. So it's kind of like, rather than moving, you basically need two that link to each other, the ingredients and the menu.
Well, I sort of agree with that. I think I would put it slightly differently in that the business only cares about the first one. They don't care about the ingredients. And as technologists, we get sucked into the ingredients because it's cool and sexy and all the rest of it. But the business doesn't care. And getting the technologist's head around that part is the important part.
But I'm going to come in quite strongly on this, though, because unless you have some kind of way of dealing with the ingredients piece, you're just going to die. And the there's a lot of talk in the industry at the moment around orchestration. So how do you, if you need to deploy an application, what are the servers? What's the landscape of servers that need to be spun up to actually support that application? What order do you spin them up in? When something needs to change, what are the dependencies between them, and so on? And that cuts. I mentioned servers, but that has to cut across, as you were saying, storage and networking as well. And without that, you end up still being constrained by how quickly you can actually do a physical deployment. With it, though, not only can you move much more quickly and be much more responsive, but you also then have the flexibility to potentially lift that thing up and put it down somewhere else.
Correct.
And that is a really, really important thing for the future.
I mean, I would actually agree with you there, because one of the things that we've done, for example, we call them cloud maps. But this is a complete orchestration deployment template. So that's, if you like, the kitchen bit, building the template.
It's kind of a recipe, isn't it? So you've got the menu.
Right. They build that piece, but what's delivered to the business user is, here's half a dozen templates. Click on that, and it automatically then deploys the servers, allocates the storage, builds the network, deploys the app, and it's up and running in minutes with a single click. That's the sort of model you're getting to, and that's now capable and available today. And
there are lots of vendors out. I mean, forgive me for talking about others, but look for words like assemblies, patterns, cloud maps. HP calls them. They're all the same kind of idea. So it's getting a lot of legs this way.
It's automating the complicated bits. That's the key. It's about automation. So if I'd like to then move on to the technical side of it.
To the technical fails that you see.
Challenges we keep saying, and we broke down into 4 pieces here. And some of them overlap with the business pieces, but they are quite different. In terms of losing control, so this is the shadow IT piece, and we've kind of touched on it already, but it is important, because once you lose control, getting it back is really hard. And it only really happens if the business app really gets into big trouble that they come back and help you.
Do you have to be a bit nasty cop about this? So you can't do it. You just can't, guys, or else we can't work with you.
Well, you've got to have a management structure high enough up that will back you up.
Yeah.
So you need some sort of authority to actually get it done. But actually, the best way is to deliver value. Right. So actually deliver the piece.
I suppose no one actually wants to go through this process of doing things with credit cards. They just do it because.
Correct. They do it because they don't think they have a choice, because they want to move 5 times faster than IT. I can't wait 6 months. I've got to have it next month because Christmas is coming.
Can I just say that basic negotiation principles come in place here, because and understanding the applications, how sensitive they are from a security perspective, data management perspective, compliance, risk of delivery, and so on. And there's a whole spectrum there. And basic negotiation principle is you give people something, you give something away that's easy for you to give away to get some goodwill back, and then that gives you the right to say, no, you can't do that. And I think that's something which IT needs to get a little bit more into.
Absolutely. It's back to the business interface piece. The 2 things about this staying in control, one of the things that we is being open.
What does open mean?
Meaning in terms of choosing vendors to work with that will actually help you interoperate. So if I can put it in this way, I actually believe one of the most interesting ways to judge vendors today, because industry is diverging quite sharply. There are those that are going down the, I would say, closed proprietary lock-in route, and there are those that are going down the open route. I think you should be explicitly going down the open one. But for me, I tend to use the thing they call the kindergarten test for judging vendors. So if you've got little kids, when they come home at the end of term, the thing you really care about is how well do they share with others? And did they play well in the sandpit with their friends? Actually, it may sound simplistic, but I think that is the test for a vendor today. How well are they willing to play with others? Are they willing to, as you build your shared infrastructure, share technologies? Are they willing to share IP with you? Are they willing to share at all? And some vendors are, and some vendors are explicitly not. So that, for me, is one of the things that will help you build the right path to the future and not get stuck inside the silos.
There's interesting words, because one of the questions we got here, Jonathan, I'll deal with the substance of it later because it's a great question. We'll talk about compute, but he's saying, the first rule of cloud is surely, what's my exit strategy?
Correct.
If I have to change, how do I change?
Absolutely. We spend all the time, when you look at contractual arrangements for cloud, getting in is easy. Right? I say, phone call, credit card, you're up tomorrow. Getting out, 2 years later, when you've got data somewhere in the server or the storage is in some country you perhaps never thought about, and the vendor potentially isn't there anymore, exit strategy is absolutely what it's all about.
There is no exit.
And we spend a lot of time today. So when you talk about cloud migration strategies today, it's about helping people who made poor decisions get to a better place. So we've recently introduced a whole rash of migration strategies to help people take an existing cloud service that, nice idea, didn't work. How do I get to a better one? And that's where we're spending
So
a lot of
otherwise
time.
your only exit strategy is get another job before people find out what you've done.
Or you have to start again, and the business
Yeah.
will suffer from that.
Can I say, also, this exit strategy idea is also important for internal applications as well, because you've got a lot of vendors out there at the moment. The term we use, a generic term, integrated stacks, where they're basically trying to sell you a bunch of stuff that's integrated from top to bottom. And everyone claims that it's open, but every one of them comes with embedded management tools. So I'm not going to make any specific comments on any one of these, but before committing to any one of these things, you've got to make sure that you understand if you do need to move in the future, or you need to integrate in the future, you know how you're going to be able to do that.
Yes.
Got it. I'm going to have to move you.
One last point here is one of the mistakes we do see a lot is everybody knows security is important, and too many people bolt it on at the end. It's got to be absolutely systemic and endemic in everything you do to make sure that however you put the services together, inside, outside, hosted, cloud, private, public, hybrid, security is the fundamental place you start from, not I've built it, now I better check if it's safe or not. And we see far too many people doing it at the end, not at the beginning.
We have an extensive library of regcasts talking about how you ensure consistency and security
Absolutely.
in a hybrid environment, which is not a trivial problem, is
Get
it?
your Active Directory sorted out before doing any of this big stuff, basic stuff like that.
Yeah, look back. Look on the reg. We've got some good stuff about that, actually.
Yeah.
We did some good broadcasts on that, I thought.
So second one, virtualization. So today's lock-in place. Because people think, it's okay, I've virtualized everything, and actually what they've done is create yet another island of, or another silo, if you like, another island of technology. I've got my VMware stack over here, I've got Hyper-V over there, and those two guys, those two teams probably dislike each other more than the Unix and mainframes guys did in days gone old. That's unacceptable. And this is where the openness bit at the virtualization layer becomes really, really important. Because locking yourself into a virtualization vendor is no better, potentially worse, than a hardware vendor. It's just another source of lock-in, and too many people have, I almost hesitate to say it, but have sleepwalked into that level of lock-in. Know what you're doing and make sure you're buying openness, not closed. Applies in that space as well. The last two are really about core technologies themselves, where people have existing infrastructure that they think will be fine in the new world. And most of the time, actually, it's just not going to get there. Storage is one. In the cloud world, storage capabilities change minute by minute, second by second. Capacity goes up, it goes down. Well, typically goes up more than it goes down, but it flexes all of the time. Having a storage architecture that will actually cope with that. So you get back to the automation piece. If you haven't got automated tiering in your storage from solid state to offsite backup, you've missed a trick. If you haven't got thin storage technologies in there, you've missed a trick. And making sure that you can cope. And it's about coping with the level of change that's the difference. Storage in the past, it just got bigger every day. Well, that's okay, because you kind of predicted and 6 months' time I need to buy some more storage space. Cloud doesn't do that to you. It changes much more quickly. So you have to have storage that adapts to that rate of change much more than you ever had in the past.
So we are going to have a regcast specifically about cloud storage and how you plan it and what you do about it. So coming up in this series, so stay tuned for that one. But it is fair to say there's a kind of a Cinderella strategy, isn't it? It's not something that...
Again, it's thought about at the end, it's not planned at the beginning, and again, the service is in there, it's running, the business user may love the service, and the back-end technology can't cope and deliver, so you start getting back into the same problem again.
This picture of the guy you put in, this is how I imagine your colleague Tony Locke there when he's not in the studio with us. I imagine him standing, wearing his tie, pointing at a large hard disk.
Well, that large hard disk in there, you have more storage in your phone than there's in that. You probably have more storage in your watch than is in that drum there. But the ability to actually cope with change, you've got to keep up to date with it. And similar thing applies to the last piece, which is around the network. And this is typically the bit where people go grey when we start to mention it, because it's the bit people are terrified to change.
Yes.
And it's because the network, above all else, has been designed in a very rigid way, and it's been designed classically in that three-tier model you see in the middle of the screen. But it was designed to do client to server and back again, north-south traffic, and cloud doesn't work that way. Cloud is very much more east-west traffic. It's all about server-to-server traffic. It far less ever touches the devices at the edges.
It's a big project to go and start with this again, and you've got to do it properly.
You have to do it properly, but you have to think about how do you delayer it. And this is how do I go from a physical thing to a virtual thing? How do I take it from a 3-tier model to a 2-tier model? Technologies are all there today. Technologies are there right now to have hybrid networks. Same as we talk about hybrid cloud, so you can mix and match the vendors. 5 years ago, people couldn't have believed you could do it. You can. It's reality today. In fact, it's a necessity today, because no one vendor is actually going to deliver you all the pieces you want in the timescale you want and the price you want. You've got to keep your network up to date, because again, the lack of predictability that cloud brings to you will kill you here faster than anything.
How aggressive do you think IT departments should be about the evolving technologies in managing these hybrid networks, for example, or cloud networks?
This is the last great bastion of proprietary technology in our industry. And this is the bit where, as we'll show on the next slide, the world is actually going to be a mixture. And this is not a plug specifically for us, but this is how we see the world. You will have, in almost every company I talk to, a little bit less on the smaller end, but certainly in the mid and large scale, traditional IT, and it will still be there. You will have private cloud because you've moved some of your traditional IT to a much more flexible model. You may well have some of it hosted and managed for you. You may well start buying public services from HP and others. Typically people there have started with test and dev because they don't care about the data, and that's always the crucial part. Otherwise, you've got the auditor, regulator, compliance officer question saying, so where is it then? How do I do this? But the reality is, you will have all of it. And it's how do you manage that mixed environment, hence the shades of grey, the point I made at the beginning. The world will look like that. Different organizations will have different balances, but you will have all of it. And having the mindset, the organization, and the tools to manage it, we believe is the thing that makes the difference between those that are struggling and those that are actually getting huge benefit from this.
Is this an ongoing process of trying to reach a sort of an elusive goal, one of these things that it always seems to be just a little bit away, but in the struggle towards it, that's where you get the benefit? Or is it something you can definitely say, now you've achieved it, this counts?
Well, I think you can say this counts for the business requirements we have today, but given that the business will be different tomorrow, can I change it quickly to keep up? So you'll never get to a nirvana state and then be able to say, I'm done, I can retire to my island now. That's never going to happen. And it's recognizing that this really is the constant evolving position. And that's not comfortable. That doesn't make people feel, we all like to think we've got a goal and we're going to achieve it and we can stop. This is much more about getting to the goal and achieving it and recognizing that now you're geared up to be able to cope with what comes next.
Now, so it's approval here for integrated stacks, as you're talking about, as long as you've done your homework.
And so long as they pass the kindergarten test of integrating with other people. Otherwise, you bought yourself a new generation of lock-in.
Is that going to be integrating with everybody, or can you just pick a little ecosystem?
Well, there are certain standards, or standards is too strong a word. There are certain groups that are trying to foster interoperability and look out for how much they acknowledge those, participate in them, even drive them, and that's a good indicator of how seriously they're taking interop. And so it's not necessarily everything needs to plug to everything else. It's that at least you're kind of working to some principles that ease the migration where necessary.
I think one of the things that is an important point, and I almost hesitate to use the words, but as you move to this sort of model, most organizations are going from tens or 50s or hundreds of suppliers to a much shorter list of partners. Partner's an uncomfortable word because that means sharing. It means sharing risk, it means sharing IP, and making sure that the partners that you engage with in this world interop with each other. So I think to your question earlier, it's with a smaller number of people that you really trust. Now, my list may be different from yours, but I'm probably looking to deal with 5, not 50.
Yeah, I agree.
And making sure that those 5 actually partner with me, not just sell me stuff. That's a big test for me.
Okay, there's a question here from Simon. Is storage tiering not a false economy? drives constantly in flux, hence burning through them a lot quicker, increasing the channel multiple drives fail at the same time as capacity loading.
No, absolutely not. If you've got the management technology right. Right, if you're trying to do it all manually and you're trying to go from tier 1 to tier 3 to tier 5, you'll burn up storage architects like there's no tomorrow because they'll spend their whole life trying to move data around. You've got to get the technology to automate it so that you then set the pro forma and the rules in place. So for this app, they get that level of storage performance, then you're in a good place. So it's automating the management that's the key there.
You end up with much better utilisation, and that's where a lot of cost savings come from. The other thing is you'll find that as you move into these more advanced storage systems, things come automatically as part of that deal, like compression, and that gives you further benefits from a cost perspective.
Thin storage technology is the key thing for today. If it's not built in, if it's not part of your architecture, you've probably got the wrong one.
And Jonathan, who I alluded to earlier, he was talking about this your shades of grey, the hybrid, the public or the private, when we're talking specifically about compute. He's saying, is that not a good strategy to just say, I'll go out and buy all my compute power?
It comes back to the core versus context. The business may not allow you to go and do that, and if you break it into just compute or just storage or just network, all you're doing is recreating the next generation of silos. So while it's appropriate for some things, it's a business-driven decision. It's not a technology-driven decision. Yes, you could because you could well have cloud-style compute cycles that are only in-house. That's fine, so long as you've got the bursting capability to go to the public ones and back. Comes back to, does your partner allow you to do that or not? So it comes back to making sure you've got the right partner and management in place.
The one you got the right commercial contracts, because if you go into one of these flexible, dynamic cloud environments and you put fixed workloads up there, you're going to end up just paying a lot more for the same compute capacity.
Correct.
So it's horses for courses, really.
Yeah.
Okay, there's and a question from Sarah as well. We've got a lot of good questions coming in here, so I just want to get them in. And it's like, and Sarah's saying, Tina's, when we were talking about high levels of security, talking specifically about higher levels of security and availability, you might get that. She's saying, why don't they offer better sort of warranties and service levels and take more risk, rather than excluding virtually all liability? Basically, why aren't you promising more on the service levels when it comes down to... I'm speaking to you as a general...
I'm staying out of this one.
Yeah, well, I think thank you, Dale. No, I think it's just part, for me, evidence of the maturity of the marketplace. You always, when something is new like this, everybody starts off on either end and you mature very quickly into a more pragmatic place in the middle, and that's the process we're going through right now.
I will say something, in that you can get those kind of guarantees and commitments. Usually if you flip to a dedicated architecture at the moment, or there's some level of dedication in there. Right. So you can go off-piste, basically.
Or you recognise, certainly what my organisation does is we offer different styles of service. So if you want a completely public service where the liabilities are very low, that's fine. But actually if you want a production-level service, and we tend to see the public ones is where test and dev lives today, because I want to buy lots for a fortnight to beat my application to death to know if it's going to work. But actually say I want to run production, and production flexes month-end, quarter-end, year-end, we'll do that differently with very different SLAs that we will absolutely stand behind. And
quite frankly, people apply double standards to this. I remember someone, we were doing a webcast on Office 365, was it? And someone said, so why is 4 nines really good enough for an email system? Just like, well, does your existing email system really have 4 nines at the moment? To be honest,
just 4 nines at completely different times. Yeah, it's like but I see that there's a sort of a negotiation goes on here, but also there's a realisation of exactly what we often talk about is realising exactly what you do need to buy.
Cloud providers are running a business. They obviously need to make it work for them. They're living with real-world constraints in the same way as you are when you run your own data centre. So there's not some magic wand they can...
I knew I'd lure you in the end. I knew you couldn't keep quiet about it. I just said it's...
But it also comes back to the fact that you've got to have the business involved with that, because you've got to actually sit down and say...
These are business decisions.
As you say, is 4 nines adequate for an email system? For a lot of businesses, probably.
Yeah.
Is it adequate for your core transactional business?
Absolutely.
Probably, absolutely not. So it is having the business involved as well.
So I just want to wrap up now, because we're getting near the end. I just want to wrap up with Solicitor Dale's pick on this. Is actually my thing as well. It's my favourite as well. And this is sort of like not even the glass is half full. This is the glass is completely full for what will happen. You know, so you've got there we have. We've managed to achieve this. The teams are working together. Everything is sort of blended, and you don't need to work in a fixed location. It's terrific. Everything we've been talking about to people for I don't know ever since I've been a journalist about how you won't need the office anymore. We won't have to go to big sheds in Bracknell to work anymore, and that's fantastic. And then we finally solved this problem about access. I think that'll be great as well. We won't have to do any more edgecasts about the virtual desktop or anything like that because the problem will have gone away. And that's terrific, isn't it? But then there's the management, isn't there? I hope I'm retired by then.
But I actually, a little bit of me agrees with that because management is the critical part, and it's looking at people who embrace multi-vendor, multi-platform, shared management. That's how you win, as opposed to getting yourself down into another silo.
Lovely. And as we close, I'm going to put the links up there, and I'm going to read you a comment that we have in here, sort of David. He said, "Good grief, I just heard a vendor talking absolute sense. Shades of grey indeed. I don't think anyone's acknowledged mixed environments in the last 5 years amidst the cloud hype. Well done, HP." I'm not saying well done, HP, because I'd like to reserve my judgment on this, but you've got approval, and our audience are quite hard to impress actually on this. That's all right.
Good. That's
so
good.
Thank you very. What I'm saying is thanks very much for that. Thanks for coming in and giving us definite advice.
It's all
And I thought there were some hard edges on the conversation today, don't you think, Dale?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
So thank you, Dale. I've been Tim Phillips. Our hour is up. Let us know what you thought of this, and we'll do some more like it if you liked it. But meanwhile, from the Register, goodbye.